Aloha mai kako. It is such an honor and a privilege to be here. I can't believe you're putting me after Kumu Manu because she always renders me speechless. I love her very, very much. But really, my role, I feel, is to thank you so much for being here and for the work that you do and for the passionate energy that you bring to that work. At first, I said to Kelsey, I don't know, I'm not Kanaka, I'm not a STEM educator, I'm all about the humanities. And I realized, oh, but Vai Vai is value, it means water, it means wealth, well, Vai. And guess what my name means? Maya. In Hindi, it means water and wealth and value. And I said, well, I guess I'm meant to be here after all. I so wanted to be with you in the Lo'i today and to connect with you and to connect with the water there. But I went to go pick up my daughter, Suhela, who has been away for 2 weeks, longer than I've ever been apart from her. And she was most recently in Malaysia. And I was thinking about all of this convergence this week, leading up to this moment and the beautiful timing of things. So she was in Malaysia for a family reunion. Her great-grandparents' bones were excavated from an old Buddhist Chinese burial ground in northern Borneo, Sabah, and Sandakan. And she was able to hold her great-grandfather's cranium in her hand and to wash the bones in the river. And she was able to take a piece of jade that her great-grandmother had buried with her, and they put these remains in 2 beautiful ceramic urns in the temple because the youngest and only remaining child of this couple, my daughter's grandfather, is in his 70s, and they were concerned about who was going to look after these remains. And I thought about, as I was looking at these pictures, that beautiful cleansing power of this ritual. My father-in-law was himself washed in tears of gratitude and relief that he was able to bring peace to this place and to his parents in his mind. And I thought that's what we begin with, truly, is that connection. And then we continue with it and we end with it too. But I was thinking about, they're from my husband's father's from Malaysia. I was born nearby in Indonesia. And I went there for the Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience Project 3 years ago, APDR3. And I remember meeting some of our partners there at the Islamic University of Indonesia, UII. And I walked into this Muslim college and this university, and in the middle was a huge Hindu temple. And my name, Maya, is a Hindu name, born of India. And I was wondering why this Hindu temple was in the Islamic University. And they talked about another excavation and other kinds of remains. They said they were building this library around, a new library around this courtyard, and they excavated the remains of this ancient Hindu temple. And then rather than shipping them off to a museum or giving them to folks at the nearby Hindu temple, they decided to become caretakers of those remains. And so now you have Hindu pilgrims going to the Islamic Museum to visit this ancient Hindu temple. And I thought, well, that is gorgeous. And that's, that's truly connected. This notion that we are so responsible for one another and that we are enriched. And they had to take 2 additional years to build that library, and they had to reroute it completely. And I thought it was beautiful. And I was there to look at disaster mitigation options. And like the work that you're doing today and have been doing and will do, They really did an amazing job of bringing together kind of high-tech and low-tech. They had places where the community would go and look to make sure the lahar wasn't flowing dangerously. They had wonderful new tools for participatory mapping, but basically they had kids go door to door and identify in the villages at the slopes of Mount Merapi, the most dangerous volcano, I think, in the planet right now because of the gaseous, noxious fumes. They had young people identifying where there were ill people, where there were people with special needs, with limited mobility, where there were the elderly, where children were placed, to make sure that the communications between all in the villages was understood, and so they would be able to act swiftly in the event of another eruption like the kind that happened in 2010, which killed over 3,000 and displaced many more. And I met these women who were doing microfinance, looking at wonderful entrepreneurial opportunities that they began because after the eruption, they were stuck in a large, I guess, football stadium, which soccer, here, football stadium, and they were awaiting sort of normalization. The men would sometimes go back to the fields to check on it, but everything was scorched. You know, the livestock was gone. But these women, they wanted something to do, so they started making things and weaving things. And as a result, a business was born, a business that has helped. And at the time, it was 3 years later, and it helped them to rebuild together in a fashion that is called gotong royong, hands together, over 200 homes in this one village. And each family volunteered people of all age within the family to rebuild the homes and the areas for the livestock. And I thought, oh, imagine if, you know, we had, the United States government after Katrina had said, all families will volunteer several hours a day, you know, to devote to rebuilding. It would have been called communism, but it was a beautiful place. And I asked them, why did you rebuild in the same place? I said, why not move? And they said, well, there's no place to move. You know, Java is the 4th largest country in the world in terms of population. Indonesia is, I mean, and most of them live on Java. So they said, we live in harmony with the disaster, not just the mountain, but the disaster, with the hazard. But they were quite cheerful about it, and in part it was because of the connected ways that they found solutions. And they worked with the universities, and the APDR3, the Disaster Risk Reduction Resilience team, was about connecting public partnerships. It was about connecting philanthropic and, you know, and business efforts with nonprofits, universities with K through 12 schools. And in all of this connectedness, there were so many powerful solutions that were created. It was really about taking tradition and making the most of it, and using innovations to harness the power of those traditions in order to do no harm with those technologies. And it was by looking at that perspective that they, I think, succeeded in doing so much. A couple years later, I went to Morocco for some work with these 40 sub-Saharan African countries were represented, and youth from Hawaii went as well. They were looking at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and this is in advance of the World Youth Congress that's actually happening here in Hawaii next year, looking at green jobs and technologies, but also, so all these folks young people had come from Europe and everywhere. When I went to Fez, anyone ever been there to Morocco? They have like a bazaar where you go, it's the market, it's ancient. And they had taken all of these reforestation efforts that had been happening all throughout the Moroccan countryside, and they had rebuilt all of the facades using indigenous cedar. And they were replanting all of this argan oil, Moroccan oil, And then they were restoring these old water clocks that had sacred spiritual power. And the water, they had 3 different kind of systems. One going out to public spaces. You know, the water would flow naturally, kind of like in Indonesia, where I grew up. They would have the terraced rice fields, and the water wouldn't be wasted. It would flow naturally with gravity, and it would go from one section to another, and then be contained nicely in this one section where it was needed the most. And so they had done this with a whole sort of town, which was being renewed and restored. They had created places for women to come and build cooperatives. And so these waters would be rerouted either through public spaces to living spaces or to private homes for those, and depending on the different needs. And they were so impressive, creating spiritual places for young women and schools, so that the women, young girls, could come from faraway places and be boarded there and learn and take on positions of participatory leadership. I was thinking about them, and then I was asked to come here, and last week someone sent me a link about, it's called Under the Canopy, and Conservation International had taken these films. Do you know it? They made these films that are extraordinary in the Amazon, and from the perspective, you're guided by someone named Kemanya, who lives there. And he says, you know, you may think that this is a strange, mysterious, dangerous place, but it is home to me. And he said, we travel these rivers the way that you take roads. And then he guides us through, but it starts with just one tree, you know, like going all the way down to the roots, looking at the water source, and goes through all of these Amazon waterways. And it's with such a sense of intimacy. And if you follow these waterways, whether in Indonesia or Malaysia or Morocco or the Amazon or Hawaii, you do have such a powerful feeling, I think, of intimacy, of understanding. You hear so much. Everything is enlivened with the voice of the water, speaking on behalf of the multitudes, you know, and containing multitudes. And I was thinking about how in Aotearoa, where Manu, you lived, I think, until recently, right? There is the Maori put forth a proposal, and you, I'm sure, know more about this than me, but Wanganui, the river, was given legal status as an entity, as a living entity. So everything was seen from the perspective of the river, legally and in terms of policy, but also morally and culturally. And I was thinking about the Indonesian phrase, cuci mata, means to wash the eyes. I was mentioning my father-in-law's eyes were washed with his own tears. In Indonesia, this phrase is used to speak of the need at the end of a long work week to see a beautiful view, to refresh the gaze. But I think of it as so much more. It is about, I think, the need to shift our perspective, to understand more completely our own role, our responsibility, our kuleana, our capacities, to understand others, to think about the importance of the local actions we take and how to scale them up or connect using technology with others who are doing important things in the same spirit. Not to mimic what is happening far away, but to do it our own way, in such a way that connects us, though, to others who are doing it their way, and doing no harm in doing so. This notion of washing the eyes to see innovation and to understand the possibilities of our own community and the rich resources, human and otherwise, of our own community. And we wash our eyes because we need to feel a renewed sense of optimism, a renewed sense of hope, you know. And I was thinking about, too, when I was in Morocco, I heard about the alternative climate change gathering that was in, I believe, Bolivia, where indigenous people and people who were in the margins, those who had been too long rendered invisible, were really part of the conversation about how to take, you know, the technologies that we use for drinking, you know, water catchment from the trees, and how to use that to make more efficient technologies, or how to make powerful use of our wastewater. And I was thinking about all of you here today, and how I believe that your task is to not only wash your eyes with one another here, gaining inspiration and motivation and joy from one another, but also as educators to help wash the eyes of others and to refresh our understanding of our responsibility and the possibilities, and to understand that a lot of the solutions may need to come today from your grassroots efforts, from your connected ways of knowing and of communicating, and from solutions that are both grounded in tradition and pregnant with possibility and innovation. And so I just want to thank you for your work, and I hope that you're excited about this particular adventure as sojourners and as teachers. And I look forward to learning from you and hearing more about all the things that you do. And I'm a huge fan of everyone here. Thank you. Mahalo.